Excellent. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to Wednesday's caucus. Brian, would you mind calling the roll and saying who's here?
Adams. Present. Anane. Ballerin. Brody.
Present.
Farrell.
Here.
Flynn.
Here.
Hoey.
Present.
Johnson.
Present.
Jones. Keegan.
Here.
Lumpkin.
Present.
Powell. Believe is present, just not in the room currently. Do you want to note Alfredo Ballerin just showed up? Robinson. Williamson.
Present.
Zamer.
Present.
We currently have 11 people in the room. We're also joined by Council President Kelly Kimbrough, Senior Assistant Corporation Counsel Martha Mahoney, Legislative Director Brian Jimenez, Research Counsel Robert Wenner, and Junior Legislative Aide Carly Johnson. We have Steve Mercier, I believe, Mercier, from the Albany Water Department here as well.
Good evening, everyone. We'll go through the agenda and then welcome Steve Mercier from the Water Department up to just talk to us briefly. And then when that is complete, we'll go into, I'll turn it over to Councilmember Keegan for the Finance Committee meeting. So in the April 20th meeting, council meeting in local laws held, we have Councilmember Hoey's local law F and local law G. Both have passed the Public Safety Committee. I will allow Councilmember Hoey to discuss.
Sure, and thank you. I'd like to find out, let's talk about local law F and G are almost the same thing, but there was some amendments that we wanted to make that Councilmember Brody brought up that we should really have in there, and they're really good. So we came up with another local law G. But my question for our attorneys are, how do we take local law F off? Is that something at the meeting Monday I say I withdraw it, or I'm not sure of the procedure?
That should be a pretty straightforward motion to withdraw local law F. It's your decision whether you wait until after the passage of local law G or not. Recommendation would probably be that if you're interested in ensuring one of these passes, you wait until local law G is voted on to withdraw local law F so that you know the outcome of that vote. But at that point, you can move to have it withdrawn from consideration.
Okay, and that's good that you let me know about, if it doesn't pass G, then we have the F to go back to. Thank you. So this local law is going to establish the Office of Violence Prevention. This is a big thing that Mayor Dorsey Appler has been looking for. When we went down to Baltimore, we saw how they were doing it. And instead of, I brought this up before, instead of having us doing violence prevention, the police department doing violence prevention, the mayor's office doing violence prevention, it's all underneath one roof. And, we will have input. We brought that up at the meeting last night. But we feel that this is a good start to see how things work out. We want to try to get something going before the summer. We've seen some violence already start happening, so having this on the this office set up, to me, and hopefully to everybody here, is a good start that we're addressing the problem in the city. There is talk, and I better not say, there is talk of other funding grants for at least 1 year, but till that's official, we don't want to jinx it by bringing it up in case it doesn't come through. But I honestly feel that we will be able to come up with funding for this office. And if anybody has any questions, be glad to answer them. Go ahead, Derek.
Thank you. Although I wasn't at the meeting, I watched the meeting on YouTube, and one of the questions that I had is that Councilman Robinson wanted to bring his bill out of the committee as is, and one of the problems that I've been having and why I don't participate in committee is because my experience is people want you to change the stuff and they still don't support it. So when someone is asking for it to come out of committee as is, and then we go back and come up with another bill, it's kind of counterproductive to the whole process. So I wanted to know, how do we continuously get in this situation, because it happened in the last term a couple of times, that we have these discussions and then the next thing you know, another bill comes out with pretty much the same language, but all of the things that people were trying to get in it, that either the person who was carrying it didn't agree with. So I find that problematic, and it's quite undermining the way it happens, you know, and maybe everybody doesn't see it like that, but the side that I sit on, it seems to feel like that. So I just wanted to offer that.
If I could just clarify, I think you're talking about Councilmember Hoey's legislation. It wasn't Councilmember Robinson's?
Well, you know,
Just,
they're similar, but I just know that what I watch, what I listen to on the
right, but just as a clarification, both of these pieces of legislation are Councilmember Hoey's. So a sponsor, if you can't change a sponsor's legislation, only a sponsor can agree to have their legislation changed. So both of these were Councilmember Hoey's legislation. And that just process and procedure wise, it's not, just for the record, it's not something that you can change a sponsor's legislation if they don't want it changed, just to clarify that.
Yeah, and I just want to jump in, Derek. You know, there's 15 individuals, and with the president, 16 individuals here on this council, and we're not going to agree on everything all the time. And I referred to my colleague, Alfredo Ballerin. We got to compromise. We got to understand how things are going. That first meeting that we had where we passed local law F, there was a lot of questions at the end of the meeting. It was kind of pushed and rushed. We have the Public Safety Committee now is, I'm the oldest, or I'm the oldest probably anyhow, but there's all new members on the committee, and you know, people don't realize they got to second things and that we got to discuss it. I think one of the problems, my thoughts were we could do the changes at the meeting on Monday. But leadership feels, and I agree with them, that if we get into a long debate during a regular meeting, it just doesn't work out good. Publicly, it makes us look like we're disorganized. So the whole idea is that any changes, any amendments should be made during the committee meeting. So instead of waiting till the 20th, what we came up with was local law G, which is pretty much, and there's some minor changes. There's not a lot of difference between what was passed in F that's in G. I mean, what we have in G now is when the report is due. We didn't have that in F. So the report's due the first quarter of the year that's going to be implemented. We want quarterly reports. How much progress have you made? So that was put in there. One of the things that people wanted was that we approve whoever the director of the violence prevention to come to the council for confirmation. But when we did some research into it, we found out it would go against the charter, and we would probably have to do a referendum, which would push this back till next year. We need to get this up and running, as I stated earlier, now. I mean, and haste makes waste sometimes. So that's why I depend on council and leadership to make sure we're not pushing things too fast, but we're trying to get, you know, this is a living document and we can make some changes. I've talked to Mark since. He's not here tonight. He wasn't at the meeting last night. I am like 99% sure he's okay with local law G the way it is, and we'll find out Monday if that's true or not. But I think he was pushing because he really understands the violence in the city. We got to do something about, and we have a new mayor, and you know, she's facing a lot of problems that you know, To be honest with you, I couldn't deal with some of the stuff that she's dealing with the financial and with the violence uptick. So I think that's what it is. And again, it's not to be disingenuous. I'll listen to anybody, I'll compromise. Sometimes I'm firm on something, but then when you talk to people and realize that we're an organization, we're a group of people working together for the common good of the city. So I'm trying to be optimistic and positive that we're going in the right direction, and I think we are.
My only problem is the I think part. It's a number of people that's having conversation about this that didn't participate in the Baltimore trip. And even a person such as myself that lives around.
In the Baltimore, but it either isn't available or can't be played right now.
Excuse me. Even a person such as myself that lives around the violence, that is connected to it, you know, indirectly and directly, my eyes were open when I went to Baltimore and I got a chance to see how things are. So I understand trying to line ourselves up like Baltimore, but we're not Baltimore. And so as I went to the meeting with the mayor and I was against us transferring our authority, because right now I think we need as many approaches as possible. You know, the first approach isn't always going to be the best approach, and when you have 3 different approaches, that means that we have 3 different eyes or lenses to take a look through. Baltimore is so much ahead of us in terms of the structure that they have out in the community from the community's perspective. So you know, we understand that when the warm weather comes, you know, the violence goes up. But I think that some of us that are around the violence, we have a different view and a different understanding, and it doesn't always seem like it's heard or received when we have conversations. So when I hear I think, you know, I have a problem with that, because I means singular, and you know, we're a group, and although other people from the lower ward may not speak up, but you know, I speak for all of the wards that deal with the stuff that we have to deal with on a day-to-day basis. And you know, I don't think people mean to be insensitive, but when things happen in other communities, people want immediate responses, and that's how we feel in the lower, because shots fired are dangerous no matter what ward it happens in the city of Albany. So just wanted to speak to that, because I clearly you know, had a conversation with Mr. Robinson before I came here. So I'm gonna let him speak for himself, but okay. I did tell him that I would speak to what I saw when I watched the meeting that I wasn't here for. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. And ordinances introduced from Councilmember Keegan, ordinance 84226, which will go to planning. Councilmember Keegan, do you want to say anything on it?
Sure. So many of you know I had my amazing intern Ariana Costello working with me on an update to our Complete Streets ordinance. The legislation proposes to change certain components of the existing Complete Streets that the city has thus far not complied with. That includes sort of tying the reporting requirements around the Complete Streets activities that are supposed to be undertaken in street resurfacing projects to bond requests, so that we at least have an opportunity to review that compliance as we're approving financing and funding for those projects. The second piece adds to the existing Complete Streets to bring it up to date with federal legislation known as the Generating Resilient and Environmentally Exceptional Streets Act, which is not passed at the federal level yet, but seems to be the trajectory in which federal transportation dollars are going. And this would also require that we assess access to green space as we are updating our street and sidewalk projects with an effort to return green curbing to communities from where green curbing was removed. And I can get more technical as we discuss the legislation in committee, but that's sort of the meat and potatoes of what we're proposing to do.
Thank you very much. Next, we have from Councilmember Hoey, Ordinance 94226, which will also go to planning. Councilmember Hoey, did you want to say anything?
Sure. A few years ago, I came up with, actually I saw on YouTube this story about cottage courts. And what cottage courts are small houses surrounding usually like a courtyard. And you can have 3, 4, 5 houses. And when I say cottages, small houses, growing up in Queens at the Rockaways, we used to go down in the summer, and you'd walk by these, these small, they called them cottage courts or bungalow courts. So I started thinking about, wouldn't that be, if we had it in our code to allow this type of buildings to go up, it would give people an opportunity to own their own home. And, like I said, we started to work on this. Max Theory was still here at the time, and then Juliet took over, and then Brian took over, and Brian said, we still have this legislation sitting here. Do you want to push it forward? So my thoughts was, yes, let's do it. Planning had it. Planning sat on it for over 2 years, but Brad did reach out to me today. They are working on something, like he said, for a couple of years now, but we'll work it out together. Again, maybe there'll be some compromising and stuff. But the whole idea is that to allow housing in a smaller area where you would privately own it. There's probably a lot of details that'll have to be worked out. It's not something that can happen tomorrow. But I'll be glad to send you links. Anybody who wants it, just let me know. I'll send you a link, or maybe I'll just send to the whole council some links to some YouTube videos if you want to take a look at what they do. For a while there, they were tearing them down, and like California, there was a lot of them. And back in the 70s and 80s, they tore them down because they didn't think people want them. Now everybody wants them because it's an affordable way to own a house. And I'll leave it at that. If you have any questions, I'll be glad to answer them.
Thank you. In ordinances held, we have Councilmember Balleron's Ordinance 53126 that we'll be voting on. That is the inclusionary zoning legislation. Councilmember Balleron, did you want to say anything?
Sure, I'll be brief. Thank you, President Pro Tem. Just to give a little updates, the amendments were structural amendments, just wording amendments. I did get some questions from council members. If you have questions about the policy, please let me know. I think one of the questions was who's responsible for collecting the income verification, and that would be the property management company or the developer, whoever's in charge of the building. If someone's income went up between the amount of time from when they got the apartment to when they renew. When they renew, then they would have to pay market rent because they're no longer in that affordable housing income range. And again, this is to support people who are in the 70% income, which is roughly between $55,000 to $60,000. And that's it. I mean, I know we had individuals, friends that came and are not in support of this, and I know they'll be here on Monday, and I respect every single one of them, and I understand the different opinions on this bill, but I do know that a lot of work went into it to try to find a compromise, for lack of a better word, that kept to the core of what we're looking to do with having an actual legitimate inclusionary housing policy versus just having one on paper. So a lot of work went into that to get that done. And when I say that, I just want to be clear. When there was the bill last year that had 100% AMI as part of an affordable housing initiative for 100% AMI would have been $2,200 or $2,200 a unit or something like that. That's not an affordable housing initiative. This would make it so that it's at 70% AMI, which I think it's roughly about $1,400 a month. So again, it's not exactly what everybody wanted, and I know there's entities on both sides that wish it would be a little different, but a compromise is a compromise, and you know, I appreciate again everyone that was willing to do the work to find a common ground and move this forward. And if anyone has any questions, I can take it now, or you can reach out to me privately. Okay, thank you.
Thank you so much. In resolutions introduced from Councilmember Lumpkin, we have Resolution 284226R, which will honor the life and legacy of Mother Clara Lumpkin and rename a portion of South Swan in her honor. That will go to General Services. Councilmember Lumpkin, did you want to say anything on this tonight?
Not at this time.
That's good.
Thank you.
From Councilmember Johnson, Resolution 294226R, which is a resolution celebrating the hard work of Coach Cancer, who led the CBA to a remarkable win at the state championship game. Did you want to say anything on this, Councilmember Johnson?
No, just excited to recognize the coach is one of our local guys, and also the CBA, although they're in Colony, I still have a spot in my heart for the brothers, and I just think that anytime that our kids win a state championship, and especially when it's undefeated, is a reason to celebrate them. So I look forward to Monday.
And we appreciate you doing it, because we definitely know there's Albany boys that go to CBA. Would you like to take that out of order? So we take that in the beginning. Just want to note that. And is this something that all council members would like to co-sponsor? We'll confirm on the night of, but yes. So we'll consider this all. Thank you very much. Councilmember Powell, Resolution 304226R, we will be voting on that. This is a resolution celebrating the 70th season of the Westland Hills baseball and softball. Councilmember Powell, did you want to say anything?
No, I've just been involved at Westland Hills for many years. I see Steve's here, and I know he has, and probably other council members have. And it's just Albany staple. A lot of us played there who are from this area, and now our children play there. So just want to recognize the folks that work all year to have a successful season.
Will there be people coming from Westland Hills? Would you like to take this out of order?
Yes, please. I believe there are a few people, so should. Yep.
So we'll also plan on taking this out of order. And is this something all council members would like to co-sponsor? Looks like that's a yes. And I would also note for any national people, I believe that it is the 75th year of national. Not, we were Westland Hills people. I just want to put that clear out there. But that might be something for whoever represents it to consider.
Real fast, I received a call that they're going to have a parade on the 25th, Saturday the 25th, at 10:30. They're going to go from Calvin Avenue into the park, and they would love to have, you know, elected officials attend. I'm going to try to make it if I can.
Yeah. Yeah, thank you. Right, that's opening day. I think the parade technically kicks off at 11, but like, yeah, 10:30, 11. It goes down Colvin down Lincoln from Colvin and around to the park. So they have a ceremony. People can make it.
And there's also a parade that day for National, which at 9:30 with pancake breakfast.
It's not the same. It's not the same day this year, though. So that's.
It's not? Oh,
I don't
gosh.
believe so.
Oh, it's unusual. Next from Councilmember Anane, Resolution 314226R, which is a resolution declaring April 22nd to be Earth Day in the city of Albany and commemorating the 56th anniversary of Earth Day. Did you want to say anything on that, Councilmember Nane?
No, just that we've been passing this legislation to encourage residents of the city of Albany to be environmentally conscious on a daily basis. So I just want to thank everyone for their continued support and those who want to support as well.
And is this something all council members would like to be co-sponsors of? Looks like that is a yes. We'll note that. We will not take it out of order, though. Next, from Councilmember Williamson, Resolution 324226R, resolution honoring the life and legacy of Reverend Graham and renaming a portion of 2nd Avenue in his honor. That will go to General Services. Did you want to say anything on that, Councilmember Williamson?
Yes, thank you, co-sponsor. I'm very excited for Pastor Reginald Graham. He's been such a pioneer in the south end of 2nd Avenue. Not as well cutting young men hair as well. I think this honor would do such a good for him as well, because a couple years ago, one of his barber got, murdered right in front of a dead borough light on 2nd Avenue. And I just think that as far as that, doing this right here, naming the street after him, will be so important for him and his family as well. So once again, I thank you guys.
Thank you so much. Next, from Councilmember Nane, Resolution 334226R, a resolution of the Common Council authorizing the City of Albany to adopt a policy related to the disposal of computers, computer software, and computer equipment. That will go to General Services as well. Got a really exciting committee meeting coming up, Jack. Did you want to say anything on that, Councilmember Nane? Okay. So with that, I'd love to welcome up Steve Mercier from the Water Department.
Can I just make a quick statement?
Absolutely, go ahead.
There's going to be, the first part is at the golf course tomorrow, so if anybody's not doing anything from 11:15, the mayor's going to do a opening ceremony for the golf course tomorrow. Thank you. 11:15.
Hello, everyone. My name is Steve Mercier. I'm the Marketing and Communications Manager for the City of Albany's Water Department. You've probably seen a lot of emails come through your inbox, especially during what we call silly season, when there's a bunch of water main breaks that are happening around the city. And so I'm just here to introduce myself formally to some of our new members, especially we haven't had a chance to meet officially. Just make sure you've got my business card, and just to kind of give you a quick rundown as to some of the ways that I communicate with you and some of the reasons of, the whys behind that. So I'm always here to try to help you with a resource to give you a touch point back into your wards and into your communities. You are those leaders, the glue that kind of helps pull this city together in ways. And so I want to make sure that you have opportunities as much as possible from my department to be able to, one, answer questions, be able to reach out to your community and have the right information at all times, and also to give you my phone number. If there is a time when you have a question or you cannot answer, you can always reach out to me. And also, and I will send this email out to everybody here when I leave here tonight, on the 22nd, we will be downstairs doing a proclamation signing at 11:30 in the morning. The proclamation signing will be to support the next 100 years, as 1926 was when the committee was formed to create what the current water department is now. That was signed by Governor Smith and Mayor Thatcher, and we will have Mayor Thatcher's grandson on point with us to help with that proclamation. We have some other elected officials that will be there, and would love to see Common Council members show up if you could. And with that, I'm just gonna, should I just leave these here? I'm gonna pass them around. It's just my business card, just so you've got my phone number, that's all.
Yep, if you want to leave them there, we'll...
Text me all the time.
And I will note, if you haven't done a tour of the water department and all the water systems, I think that they had to put them on hold for a bit, but when they bring them back, I highly, highly recommend doing it. It's very, very educational and helpful to know about where our water comes from and all of the infrastructure and things like that. Thank you so much. Yes, go ahead.
But thanks, Steve. I know how to get a hold of you. Before you leave, Steve, So especially for the newer members of council, I know we talked about doing a tour as Councilmember Farrell had suggested. And I know we had conversed about needing to wait a little while. There was still some construction going on at like the Beaver Creek site. I would love to be the point person to organize that, and so I'll get with you on dates that would work. Is spring, summer still looking like a good time to do that, or should we wait a little longer?
You're talking for, site visits? Yeah, so for Beaver Creek, that's live and ready to go. We can do that just about any time.
Okay.
With the treatment plant, we're just wrapping up some construction projects. So give us a little bit of time, but not, I think the spring is fine. And the alcove where the reservoir is, I invite everybody to come see. It's an absolutely beautiful piece of property. Anytime you can all come out, I'd be happy to help with that.
If council members can email me or text me or just raise your hand, whatever is easiest for you, I will make sure to coordinate with everybody who's interested in taking Steve and the team up on a tour.
Yeah.
Okay, is there anybody who doesn't? Because Alfredo. So you're good. Everybody else wants to go on the boat on the alcove.
I can't promise a boat ride.
I don't think we get to go on boats.
I figured as much. Okay, understood.
It's still really cool.
It's still, yeah.
All right,
Okay.
Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much, everyone. I appreciate it.
Thank you so much. And if there is nothing else from anyone, we can close caucus, and I'm happy to turn it over to Councilmember Keegan. Could I get a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
And as always, all council members are welcome and encouraged to attend.
All right, I want to be mindful. Guys, I want to be mindful of the mayor's time. Okay. Good evening and welcome to the April 15th Finance Assessment and Taxation Committee meeting. With us this evening is Finance Chair Megan Keegan, committee members Deirdre Brody, Arthur Lumpkin, Ginny Farrell, and Alfredo Ballerin, as well as council members Flynn, Zamer, Hoey, Williams, and Powell. We have staff members Robert Wenner, Ryan Jimenez, Carly Johnson, and representation from Corporation Counsel. Martha Mahoney. We have one public comment for this evening. If I could have Robert Ward come up. Right in the middle.
Good evening. My name is Bob Ward. I live on South Pine Avenue in the Pine Hills neighborhood. I'm a born and bred Albany guy, recently turned 70, and this is the first time I've had the opportunity to address the Common Council, so this is a privilege for me. I thank you. I also thank you, the Finance Committee in particular, but all of the members of the Council and the Council's leadership. I know that you are expending extraordinary energy in trying to identify as well as possible the specifics of the financial challenges facing the city. And really, so I, of course, lived through the Corning years when there were many periods when the city was facing financial challenges, and it's been an up and down road. Over the last 15 years or more, it's really been sort of a simmering problem of chronic financial stress, and this is evidenced, among other things, by the fiscal stress scores that the Office of the State Comptroller issues. In the 13 years for which the State Comptroller's Office has produced its fiscal stress index, Albany has been on that list 11 of those years. And in a typical year, there are maybe a dozen, maybe 20 or so municipalities throughout the entire state of New York that are on that list. So Albany is unusual, perhaps unique in that regard. And I know as you strive to understand better again, the specifics of the numbers, it will be a challenge simply to do that, and that is a long topic for discussion, I know, but I won't attempt to speak to that. And you will no doubt be facing some difficult policy choices, spending cuts, revenue increases, perhaps borrowing that will shift current costs to the future and thereby increase the problems in future years. You'll also be faced with process decisions. Are there steps that the city can take to better manage the budget adoption process, the budget consideration process, the budget management process during the fiscal year? And I wanted to make one recommendation in that regard. I had the privilege for 9 years of working for State Controller DiNapoli as the Deputy State Controller for Budget and Policy Analysis. I left that position 5 years ago. I emphasize I'm not here speaking on behalf of the Controller's Office, only as a resident of the city, a concerned resident of the city. And my suggestion is that the city would do very well to ask the State Controller to undertake a budget review, as that office does commonly for jurisdictions, municipalities, as well as school districts that are encountering significant financial challenges. These budget reviews are not audits. They are not gotcha exercises. Instead, they are attempts to work cooperatively with local elected officials, such as yourselves, the mayor, the city treasurer, and others, and provide an independent and expert perspective on the specifics of the financial condition of the city, which itself is extraordinarily important and right now is not available, as well as their analysis of the reasonableness of revenue estimates in the budget, expenditure projections, and other matters. And they will also comment, often will make comments on specific steps that might be taken to improve all of that process going forward. And it can be I think many local elected officials around the state have found it a very useful exercise. I think it would also be very helpful in terms of restoring public confidence in the city's ability to manage its finances. Any time a municipality goes through a difficult challenge such as Albany is facing right now, rightly or wrongly, members of the public may conclude that things are not being done as they should. And again, I think bringing in this independent source of expertise could serve the city well in starting to rebuild that confidence going forward. And I will note that there have been some municipalities, including the city of Troy, the city of Buffalo, the city of Yonkers, New York City, that over the years have experienced chronic financial challenges to the point where they needed to engage in deficit financing, which seems like more and more likely down the road for the city of Albany as we look ahead, although that will remain to be seen. And each of those 4 municipalities has been required by the state or has been placed under the jurisdiction of a financial control board, which is a mechanism to instill financial discipline, which can be a good thing when necessary, but also removes decision-making from the local officials. And that's something that I'm sure we all want to avoid. I know that my time is limited. I will end there. But again, I want to thank all the members of the council and the Finance Committee for your diligence in trying to understand these challenges, and wish you best of luck going forward. And thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Ward. So for the meeting this evening, we are going to start with the mayor's office. Oh, nope, I said thank you. For our meeting this evening, we are going to start with the mayor's office, who we invited in to provide an update to the council body. After that, I have prepared a presentation that sort of hopefully will provide both the council as well as the general public an understanding of the budget development process and what has been happening over the last several years in terms of the city's financing. So if the folks from the mayor's office would like to come up. Deputy Mayor Chris Ellis and Commissioner Dixon. Commissioner Dixon, do you need to be connected to any of our technology?
I don't know. I don't know.
Okay.
Thank you.
Hope everybody's doing well this evening. Good evening.
Good evening.
A little bit. So, I think by way of introductions, for those I haven't met directly or spoken to, my name is Chris Ellis. Been with the mayor's office for about 2 months now. Been a fast-paced and enjoyable time. Glad to be here too. It is. We'll be glad to give you a quick update on things that we've done since first announcing the original budget positioning. So I think that it's important to note some of the lead up to the announcement. We prepared diligently for the annual 10 Cup Day with the state, which is a big deal for municipal governments. Usually all the focus is on New York City, but the upstate mayors all sit at the table and talk about the budget. The refrain across the state was the same. Every incoming mayor, at least some vocally, Buffalo, and New York City, we're talking about huge budget deficits. We hadn't seen that yet, or at least the alarm hadn't been pulled. The difference between, let's say, New York City and Albany, New York City's fiscal year is July 1 through June 30. So they're very aware of where they are. We had just come out of the end of the 2025 fiscal year. So we didn't holler and scream about the budget situation. We knew we had some initiatives that we wanted to try to get. We always wanted to position the city for additional resources from the state. When you look at Albany, we have a large portion of our real estate that is not-for-profit and or state-owned. That's been a major theme for budget presentations for many years, and we wanted to reinforce that. Track 10 days later, that's where we had to go into action because we saw at that time 15 million deficit 2025, and it was becoming very, very clear that that was real. We got that information from the treasurer and also a forecast of 22 million projected for 2026. That led us into action, immediate hiring freeze, spending, just stop everything, let's hit the pause button so we can figure this thing out. Commissioner Dixon led a series of meetings with all of the departments to do a review and ask for budget scenarios that included a reduction of 7, 10, and 15. Now, I'm hoping these are all things that we're all aware of at this point in time. There are some things that we saw once we started to peel back the onion, both in the departments and inside of the budget, that we knew were going to be big problems. For 2025, something we can't fix, something that was essentially developed almost 2 years ago, or at least started 2 years ago. The revenue just did not come in many, many places. Whether they were grants, taxes, sales tax, many different revenue lines were under expectation. On the other side, with new processes and procedures and protocols for public safety, we can immediately see an increase in overtime that we've pretty much tagged to major events around the city in order to provide public safety. I think it's fair to say that we won't be able to cut our way out of this budget, and that we're going to need some of our best minds as we lay our egos down to figure out, as the government of this city, how we can address this issue. Well known that we've gone up the hill to our state partners, our delegation, the governor's office, the majority leader's office, the speaker's office, all of their fiscal staff, Senator Fahey, Assemblymember McDonald, Assemblymember Romero. We've all asked them for help. They are aware, they are paying attention. And they're paying attention not only to our numbers, but how the government writ large of the city of Albany is interacting with each other. A lot of people would like to see us succeed. And we have a lot on the table. With the CAP initiative, folks excited about the ability to invest in this city. There's a real desire to see the various components of government that have sometimes, not all times, sometimes been at odds with each other, put their unified brains together and figure out how they can contribute their part to getting us out of this budget deficit and crisis. I'm going to turn it over to my colleague and see if I screwed anything up or missed anything. And then I don't know, Majority Leader, is there a Q&A that you would like to happen as well?
Yes, I think council members will want to ask questions, but I defer to Finance Chair.
Chair?
Yep.
Q&A.
We did notify council members that they would have an opportunity to ask a limited number of questions, keeping in mind of everyone's time this evening, because there's going to be a whole second component to this, and also keeping in mind that we are still in the process of closing out the 2025 books, and so there may be questions that cannot be answered at this time. That does not mean that we aren't going to come back to the table and parse through that information at a later time. Commissioner Dixon.
Thank you. Good evening, everybody. So I just wanted to talk more about some of the work that we did with the department specifically. We've talked about the 7, 10, and 15% scenarios that we were looking for, and we went in understanding that in many cases, the way that this budget was developed, the departments were not aware of some of the top-line cuts that had been made to the budget numbers that they thought that they had submitted. So that created an additional challenge for the departments in getting to the 7, 10, and 15% scenarios that we were asking for, that those numbers had already been reduced and they were not aware of that. So that was one piece that we walked into and had to work with the departments to adjust to get to those cuts in the process. We also found in this process that, as Deputy Mayor mentioned, the revenue numbers were not what the departments had submitted in many cases. So we were working through that with the departments as well to try and reconcile some of those differences of what is calculated in these budgeted numbers and what the departments had submitted. So that was another layer that we uncovered in this process for the 2026 budget. So I just wanted to make sure that was also on the table. That is all I have at this point. Happy to answer any questions.
Okay. Do we have any questions from members of the committee? Councilmember Farrell.
Thank you so much, and I really wanted to thank you for coming in. It's, as we all know, council members operate in public, and we can't really have discussion with our colleagues unless we are in a public meeting because of open meetings law, which is a very important thing. We value open meetings law a great deal and think that the transparency is important, but it does make it complicated when there's something timely that we really want to discuss. So we really appreciate you coming in to answer questions and understand that there's limited knowledge right now. We're kind of on the ground moving forward with the knowledge that we get, and appreciate your willingness to come in and hope to have more meetings in the future. And I would note, for any questions that we can't answer tonight, we can note them down and add them to the list, because we do expect to be continuing forward with this. I think that some of the pieces that we're looking for is because we also, especially for council members that were here, we want to make sure that that number one, we're doing everything that we should be doing, that we haven't missed things, because that's one of the important things. We have to look at our own process and procedures. So I know that there's an interest, at least on my end, to make sure that we're able to do that deep dive of what those numbers are. So I just wanted to, I think that they're still working on the fourth quarterly report for 2025 in order to close out 2025. And I think that there's also, there's still anticipated ENA bond transfer to close out the books from 2025, but those are pieces that I would say are more timely than others as soon as that information is had. And we're still hoping, well, we still want to have the full ERP permission so that we can do that deep dive on our own to see what it is that we missed and didn't miss. And we have most of them, but we're waiting on the contract central and the invoice central on that as well. And just look forward to kind of continued working with you through this. Some of us have, as I've said, we've been here, and I know that you're new to this, but we appreciate everybody coming together, and we appreciate all of the advocacy for additional funding. Thank you.
Any other committee members? Councilmember Vallerin? Yes.
I'm sorry, my hearing must be off. Thank you, Chair. And thank you both for being here with us today and your work on this. I know it's not easy to, and the mayor, it's not easy to go up the hill on Tin Cup Day and ask for X, Y, and Z, and then have to go back up 2 weeks later, ask for A, B, and C. But we definitely need A, B, and C, and X, Y, and Z for our city. And I'm very appreciative of our wonderful state partners and their wonderful investments that they have done, and I continue to hope that they will continue to invest in our city, especially since we are the capital and the hub for state employers and state agencies. So I hope once they clear their budget, there is some additional support, additional investment into our city. So I just have two quick questions. One is really with the numbers. If there's any updated numbers that you have at this point or able to share of where we are for 2025, as well as how the efforts that have been implemented over the last few weeks, how they have maybe started having an impact on seeing some of the turnaround or trying to breach that gap that we have. I'm not sure if you have that, but if you do, it'd be great, any updated numbers. And my second one is, I know I've been asked this question in private. I just want to make sure I ask it in public. I know there was a talk about, I know there is a hiring freeze, but I also know that it's specifically not for emergency or essential. How do you say it again? Essential. I'm working on these words. Essential personnel, and I just wanted to ask specifically for our public safety department. APD, I know, has had a difficult time in the last few years when we're talking about recruiting, and I know there was talk about trying to have a strong class in the summer, so I wanted to just check to make sure that that strong class is something we're looking to move forward with, as well as our fire department and other essential personnel.
I think for the first question, I think we would probably defer to the treasurer for numbers, solid numbers. And the second part, definitely going to defer to the commissioner on those HR matters. That's her world, not mine.
So yes, for the police and the fire, we are actively in their recruitment process. We are further along with the police. I know that currently that class is 24, what we are trying to bring in with this next group, but they're still going through their civil service process at this point, so we have not stopped that for this. For the freeze part of it, we continue them in the process. The fire, we are working through, we're at the point of them preparing to do the CPAT. So that's going to be coming up in the next week or two. My dates may be off, but it's very soon. So we've kept both of those going through the process so that we ensure that we continue to recruit in that space. As far as cost, any sort of things that we saw from the freeze on non-essential spending. We also took a pause in the new system to reset the system, and we asked that, well, what we did was rejected all of the requisitions that were in the system as a part of this process and also as a part of bringing the new ERP online and resetting it. But what we asked is when we restarted that only critical requisitions went into the system, and we rejected somewhere around 580 requisitions on March 20th, which was shortly after this all went into effect. And when we reopened that, we saw that that number was down to about 130 in the first several weeks. So we do believe the departments took it very seriously, reviewed the things that they were asking for, and were really looking for just those critical asks. And so we've continued that. The deputy mayor and I are reviewing all of the requests that come in for spending as well as hiring. We talk about each of those, and we are making decisions around the things that are critical to move forward and some of the things that we can hold off on at this point. So we have seen some help there.
Thank you. Thank you for that information. And I also am appreciative that we are not pausing on the public safety recruitment. I read an article a few weeks ago about how multiple municipalities are struggling to be able to recruit and keep their numbers afloat. So I'm glad this isn't, and we've struggled as well, and we are struggling as well. So I'm glad this isn't going to set us back anymore. So thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Are you all set? Any other questions from committee members? Councilmember Brody?
Thank you, and thank you guys for being here tonight. I know this is a topic of immense importance to everybody. Just to go back to the requisitions that you were just mentioning, certainly appreciate sort of clearing those out and then only accepting those that are, I guess the assumption is, important enough to resubmit. Do you have any dollar figures that you can assign to those that were cleared out and then what has been approved since?
We don't have dollar figures specifically. A lot of what comes back in is blanket POs, so those will cover, in some cases, the entire year. So there's not a specific amount that I would attach to what has come back. We just know that the number of them decreased significantly from what was sitting in there, and the types of things that we were seeing come in are, you know, we had the ones that came in for opening the golf course, for instance. It was a number of those that come in that we moved through the system. So it's been ones that are very specific to certain operations that we're seeing come in. What we're not seeing is some of the supplies have been cut down on significantly. Some of the furniture purchases that were in there have not shown back up. So it was more about what types of things we were seeing than attaching an exact dollar amount to it at this point.
Thank you. So knowing at least what was budgeted, things like supplies, furniture, tend to be in the tens of thousands, not in the hundreds of thousands, not in the millions, and not in the tens of millions. So it's good to know that people are exercising discretion and I think commensurate with the situation we're in. But to be frank, I don't think that's going to move the needle for us, especially considering we're now into Q2 of 2026. One of the questions I have, we've all heard about the $15 million deficit that remains from last year, and that if we, if we are successful in getting additional state grants that I think you spoke to, everybody is aware of the ask, and I think the mayor's advocacy has been hugely important in that. That does not solve the problem for 2026. In fact, it seems the 2026 gap might grow, and seems to things seem to pop up every day that are either not as going as expected or may exceed the original cost anticipated. The hiring freeze and a pause on non-essential expenses for a budget gap that is potentially $22 million that we're not yet taking measures to address in this current year gives me great pause. The longer we wait to make structural changes to the budget, the more we compress the opportunity to do so, and therefore the dig has to be deeper. The pain it will be larger, whether it's on cuts, whether it's on revenue increases by way of taxes or pilots or anything else. Suffice to say, I would love to know what the administration is doing now to address not just the structural deficit from last year, but specifically where we are in 2026.
I think we agree with your overall premise that time is not our friend in 2026. I think we have to recognize that there's complexity to all of the layers of the onion that make up city government and the operation. We haven't taken any options off the table on either side of the budget equation. I think it is critical that we make a decision, or at least the two of us advise the mayor on her options for a decision to be made with the largest set of accurate information that we can possibly have. That includes information from the treasurer's office to close out 2025. That includes an enacted state budget that may help us be able to stem the tide. But also understand that the administration, your mayor in particular, is not sitting in the corner office with her hands on her head screaming, "What am I supposed to do?" We are turning over every stone. We are asking individuals who and entities that may have resources to bring some of that to bear to help us in this situation. It's not fully baked. We have to go through all of the paces to make sure we can do things properly. But I think there's a confluence of things that you're talking about that will meet at some time. But it hasn't been just in under 30 days or maybe 45 days since we really started to have this conversation. I don't think the train moves that fast. We feel the urgency. We feel the urgency. We understand time is not our friend. But all the options are on the table, and we are trying to get the best information we can. And it can't go without saying that the key staff person that had the most information about the budget is no longer employed with the city. So we're Dora the Explorer the same way trying to figure things out, working with Miriam and her budget team that may have been included in some things and may not, to get as good a set of information as we can to help advise the mayor on obviously tough decisions that will need to be made by government coming down the line. But I appreciate that. I understand it too.
Do you have a time frame as to when that will be fully baked?
When what?
When these layers of the onion will be known to us?
No, but an enacted state budget is certainly going to help.
And if I may, an enacted state budget may or may not include additional funds to plug our hole for last year.
You are 100% correct.
That is not speaking to the clock that is ticking on fiscal year, calendar year 2026, let alone 27, 8, and 9, which hopefully we'll all be here for, with our sleeves rolled up, making this, getting ourselves to the other side of this, as the mayor said. I do not think it's responsible to the taxpayers, the people who work here, the people who live here, to say we're going to wait for a state check to solve our problem last year before we start solving our problem.
That's not what I said. What I said was we needed the most complete set of information we possibly could have. That's only part of it. There are other things too.
Understood. I think the pace of the state budget eludes us currently. There are indications it could last us another couple of weeks before we have answers there. And every week that goes by that we aren't answering honest questions and sharing that data openly now are fewer weeks that we have to deal with our current 2026 issue.
Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
Go ahead.
When you say sharing that data, what specifically do you mean?
I think there's a list. There were 80 questions that the council asked on March 24th that we have yet to have written responses to, at least. I know there's also been requests, as Councilmember Farrell said, for our own staff to have access, full, unfettered access to the ERP system, so that we can not only see requisitions, which we do have today, which we appreciate, but that we can also see purchase orders, invoices, and amounts paid. That would help us get an understanding of our cash on hand situation, which I think is becoming more and more precarious. We don't know about that data. I think an opportunity to also share, I don't think we've formally asked for it yet, but would be to see the plans from the departments of the 7, 10, and 15% cuts, and to understand well before budget season the conversations we need to be having with our colleagues who run those departments about how we can support them in those discussions. So I think there have been numerous asks made, and there are other opportunities presenting themselves now where we could find additional ways to be transparent and collaborative.
Okay.
Do you think any of those are options the mayor and the administration would be willing to consider?
We've considered them all.
Understood. I think that says it all.
Our staff has communicated with, I believe our council is speaking with your legislative staff and council on the 80 budget questions, understanding that this group, those questions were mostly centered on 2025, am I correct? No knowledge that's going out to the departments to ask them to help for the understanding. I mean, I'm going to do some homework to myself and see what types of discussions were had as those budgets were being developed in the public sphere with the, when they were back in 2024. I think there is plenty of ways for us to collaborate but we are different branches of a unified government, and there are different things that we do. So I think we've been in communication with folks about those things that have been asked, and where we agree, we help. Where we disagree, we discuss.
I just, as a point of clarification, the reason why we asked questions about 2025 revenue shortfalls is because those revenue shortfalls carry directly into 2026.
We understand.
They are
I agree with you too.
monies that were duplicated and booked into 2026. So for us to have an understanding of what the deficit is for 2026, we need to have an understanding of why that revenue was booked and not realized in 2025.
And I think we would say that we've been pretty much trying to do the exact same thing.
Councilmember Brody, do you have additional questions?
I have a lot of questions. I'm not sure there's much of a point in asking them right now.
Councilmember Lumpkin, you're the only other member of the committee who has not had an opportunity to ask questions. Do you have questions at this time? I will turn questions over to members on the floor. I believe Councilmember Adams had his hand up first.
Yes, thank you, Deputy Mayor and Commissioner Dixon, for coming in. My question is pretty simple. It's just a clarification in regards to the federal, state, and county aid. Just asking whether or not if the revenue streams here are actually gone, or is that something that we can try to recoup back at a later date? Just trying to get clarification on the SAFER/HUD federal piece there, along with some of the state aid. If those are things that we can get back, or if those are out of the picture.
So we are actively trying to understand that as well. To be fully transparent here, there is a lack of information in the budget office for how some of these numbers were arrived at. And so for the 81 questions that were asked, as Deputy Mayor said, we are also trying to understand why was the number carried forward to 26 if we haven't seen revenue in that line in a year or two. So the similar thing is happening with the grants. We have grants that seem to have been carried forward with nothing that we can find concretely that shows why that happened. So part of the work that we are doing now is actually going onto the state's website to see if we can track back through the grants and the payments that have come into the city and the payments that continue to be expected, so that we can fully understand the grant lines that are showing up as revenue. So we are actively in that process. There are a number of them, and like I stated, the departments were not aware that some of these things were carried forward in their budgets as revenue. So they don't have a lot of information either. So we are trying to get to the source of how these numbers came to be.
Thank you. I had another question, but I think your response also answered that possible question as to the timeline, as to what caused this stuff. But that's all the questions I had, so I'll yield my time. Thank you.
Councilmember Zamer, and then I'll get to you, Councilmember Hoey.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. And thank you both for being here and helping us try to understand, at least in this first phase, as much as we possibly can. I just have two questions. One is to clarify something you had said, Commissioner Dixon, about how when you were having the discussion with the departments about the cuts you were asking them to identify, and they were unaware that cuts had already been made. I'm having trouble understanding that.
So it was something for us to figure out and understand as well. And from what we can see, Once the budget numbers were received, and possibly after discussions with the council or presentation to the council, you will see throughout the budget in the system that there are adjustments made by the Office of Budget Management. These adjustments, the departments were not made aware of, so there was no communication back to them to say, reduce your contracted services line by $100,000. So the department was not aware that that had happened. So we went to ask for cuts, and they were cutting off of the top number that had been submitted and had been presented, and we were looking at the adjusted number. So when you're looking at two different numbers to cut from, it's tough for them to get to that when they thought they had 400,000 in the line and they maybe only had 300,000 in the line. And I'm now asking for a cut on the 300 and not the 400.
I believe
Okay,
if
so you're saying that the budget office unilaterally made,
No, if you remember, we cut the tax rate, and
Yes.
so they had to go back
I'm sorry.
and adjust.
Quick point of clarification. Are we talking about fiscal year 25 or 26?
We're talking about last budget session, when we passed the
Okay.
budget for fiscal year 2026.
Yeah.
We cut the tax rate, so the city had to go back and find 330,000 in
Right.
savings. And then in any budget cycle, there are oftentimes budget amendments that go through in the final budget bill, which I unfortunately do not have in front of me, but that does move money from department lines to other.
and that was not communicated to the individual department heads
No.
after those changes were done obviously publicly in our finance committee meetings.
It should be reflected in the final budget bill, with the exception of how they were going to process through the roughly 330,000 we cut from the tax levy.
So just a point of clarification, what you're
Yeah, go
talking
ahead.
about is $300,000 after the fact. But what we're talking about is a $15 million deficit.
No. We cut the tax levy. There was a proposed tax levy of, I believe, 2.5%. That was reduced to 2.25%.
Right.
And that resulted in what?
It was 3 to 2.5.
Okay, sorry.
It was 3%, and at the time, when we were having this discussion at Finance Committee and also at the final budget to pass it, the discussion we were trying to have at the time was how can we limit the pain to our residents?
And that,
And part of that was we reduced the taxes from 3% to 2.5%, which
right,
reduced.
remember that, yes, of course.
Which
And just as a
reduced the
point of
revenue.
clarification, we're all talking about the 2026 budget right now, not the 2025 budget.
Correct. But the
So how much impact did
300
that
and-
change actually have on the amount that we're discussing right now that we're asking
Those were
departments
not how those cuts were going to be made were not specified
By
in
us.
the final budget vote. It was left to the administration to determine and ascertain
that's-
how those adjustments would be made.
And that dollar value of those adjustments was, do I have it correct, that was $300,000?
Roughly, yes, believe 330,000.
315.
Okay, so,
Thank you. So, I'll let you finish.
no, go ahead.
So we're talking about $300,000 that may have been moved as a result of an adopted budget for which department heads were unaware or did not review, whatever the case may be.
Well, in addition to that, there may have been also budget amendments that were changed in department lines that were negotiated in that final budget bill.
That was passed by full council in,
November of 2025.
okay. So we had an adopted budget with all of those amendments approved in November. So between November and April, nobody looked at the budget to figure out what had changed between the proposed and the adopted. Do I have this right?
I'm not going to speak for the department heads. I know that I'm a department head and I put in my budget. Unless someone comes back and tells me that my budget has changed, I'm going based on what I put in. So if no one went back to the department heads in November and December, they were not, I'm assuming they were not aware. Again, I'm not speaking for them because I'm just speaking from my own personal experience as being a department head in a large organization that sometimes communication is not always their forte.
So while I take issue with that, I've been part of other government structures where that's actually not been the case, where department heads, the minute there's an adopted budget, pour through it to make sure all the numbers match. Suffice to say, I still think we're talking about an absolutely minuscule amount of money compared to what the actual scope of the problem is here. So to get back on track to the conversation about where you were left off, I will hand it back to you.
No, thank you. I do have another, I'll pivot. This might not be a question you can answer, but it's one that I'm getting a lot of questions about, and I just don't feel I can put it off. But if, clearly if you're not able to answer it, you'll say so. The hiring freeze, is that extended to seasonal employees of the golf course, our new Lincoln Pool, and the Summer Youth Employment Program?
So we are looking at all of those. We made reductions in how many seasonal employees we hired for the golf course. We did ask the department to look at their absolute bottom line number, which was lower than what they came in originally asking for. So while we're not saying no, we're not hiring seasonals at all, we are reviewing it very closely.
And as far as you are expecting our city pools to open this summer?
We met with the department to understand the full scope and scale of what resources they would need to be able to open the pool, and there are ongoing discussions to be able to make sure that the residents of the city of Albany can enjoy the aquatic festivities this summer.
Okay, thank you.
Councilmember Hoy and then Councilmember Powell.
Sure. Thank you, Chair, and thank you both. I don't envy you sitting in those chairs. It's difficult times. Personally, whatever I can do to help, I'll be glad to help. And but I do have a couple of questions. One is that, I've been public safety chair now for quite a number of years. I know what the amount of police officer shortage that we've had. I just did a rough calculation. It's about $3 million in, with 60 vacancies, and that money's allocated. So, and again, I'm not on the finance chair, so I don't understand. But with those people not being hired, is there savings there, like that, I've roughly guessed around $3 million.
Councilmember Hoy, that is usually shakes out in overtime expenses that are spent down to make up for those vacancies. So in general, the staffing lines, when you look at our three big departments, DGS, fire, and police, if our numbers are down, you'll see us spend over budget in overtime. And then when our numbers are up, we typically spend under our budget in overtime, but may actually go over what our anticipated salary expenses are going to be.
I was just hoping to be found money.
You will see if you stay for my presentation, the sort of dip in APD salary expenditures when we were super, super low.
Okay, thank you. The other question I have for you is, I had read somewhere, and again, it could be wrong, that the sales receipts were actually up last year, so, but it shows that the revenue's down. Are we not getting from the county, or?
Councilmember Hoy, again, our sales tax revenue did increase. It did not increase to the amount
Projected. Okay.
projected.
Got it, thank you. Now I have to talk to you after. So listen, one thing, real fast, and the last thing I'll bring up is we have a problem in the city. We've had it for a number of years with Airbnbs. I know personally in the 15th ward, my ward, I have more than I can count. And these people are getting $150 a night. I know there is legislation that the state had passed that the county can start charging hotel tax. Is that something that you guys can push our county partners? Let's see if we can get some revenue there, and it's just an idea. It could be wrong, but I wanted to get that out to you.
I missed the beginning part of your question. Can you say that again?
Airbnbs. Correct. There is legislation that the state passed, I want to say about 3 years ago, 4 years ago, where counties can opt, the only thing you could do is opt out, and Albany County is opted in. They got to come up with a way, they would talk to Airbnb, Verbo, and some of the other companies to find out exactly where these Airbnbs are in the city, and then charge hotel tax. It would, and it'd be something that the county would share with the city. So it's just an idea. Maybe you can reach out and see where we're at with that. I don't know if they've worked on it yet, but I talked to my county legislator. He didn't know what I was talking about, but it is a well-known fact that they're trying to do that. Thank you.
No problem. It's not something that has been a part of our discussions thus far, but I will raise it.
Do we have any other questions for the mayor's staff? Oh, sorry, Councilmember Powell.
Hi. Okay, thank you. Thank you for being here. Again, it's probably a difficult place to sit, so we appreciate it. From looking at the numbers, it's my understanding that this is an adopted versus actual issue, right? And so it's more of a revenue issue, except for the unexpected overtime. Is that correct?
I think that's how we could categorize what we see in 2025.
Yep.
Revenues that did not hit projected amounts, even though on the expenditure side of the equation, we were under budget, but it wasn't under revenue, actual revenue that came in.
Right.
And I think, can't remember if it was the chairwoman or council member Brody who pointed out that that same logic can carry forward into the next year.
Right, of course. So I think my first question is similar to Councilmember Hoey's in that I know the previous administration had looked at additional mortgage taxes, not property taxes, but an additional tax on, when you apply for a mortgage, a bed tax, Airbnb tax, a tiering system for speeding camera tickets, as all of a way to increase revenue coming in, right? Because we already have a stressed tax base. So saying we're going to close this gap with additional property taxes is probably something that we want to avoid as much as possible. So have any of those options been considered? Are they in discussions? Are we looking at revenue generating things like that in order to assist? Not that it will totally close this gap, but in assisting this gap.
Sure. I don't think we're at the point where we have come up with any one solution that fixes everything. You don't want to just go inside of the departments and say, we'll fill the whole gap by making cuts. That's going to affect services and human beings, not something any administration, any other leader would want to do. You don't want to, like you just mentioned, make the cost of living through property tax so burdensome to folks that they can't make ends meet. So yes, all the options are still at least on the table, and we know that some will be much harder than others, but I really appreciate the fact that you brought that up, because we'd be looking to the council to help show some leadership if we had to go down that route for revenue raisers. That's not a unilateral thing that an administration can do. We have to work with you all on that. So, yes, they're still on the table, but we don't want to prematurely suggest what we do until we understand where we finally are.
Okay, that's helpful. Question about the closeout of 2025. So, you know, I appreciate that we're still trying to close that out and figure out where we are. I appreciate that this is a new administration, but I find my day job is for the state of New York, and I find that things, you know, budget, quarter closing reports and those things tend to move faster, right, than they are moving in the city. Again, I understand this is a new administration, but have you given any thought to, you know, we're a quarter and 15 days into the new year, right, and we're still closing out last year. That seems like an incredible amount of time to now try to course correct 2026 based on the fact that we don't really know where we are for 2025. So I just wanted to bring that up and see what you're doing, you know, to address that, to look at that, to see if we can produce those reports in a quicker fashion next year or in future years, because it's a difficult thing to try to figure out what to do, you know, more than a quarter into the new budget cycle with this shortfall for last year, right? So.
Agree. But I also think that, you know, there's a learning curve for any folks coming in on a transition. And what we're really talking about is the bailiwick of the treasurer's office. But the administration certainly has a function in helping to gather and or provide information to help get to the end of the road. I believe I don't know if it's statutorily defined or in the code somewhere, or if it's a policy, but the deadline is, we're running up on it really soon. And the administration, Miriam's office, Commissioner Dixon's office has been diligent with constant communication with the treasurer, his team, our departments, in gathering all the grant information, all of the contracts, and all of those things that are necessary in order for them to close it out. We agree with you. We would like to know where we are and not continue to try to shoot at a moving target. It will be much more helpful for us, so appreciate that sentiment and that question.
The treasurer has till the 20th to file the annual financial report with the state comptroller, is my understanding.
Councilmember Ballerin has one last question.
Thank you, sure. I guess my question is about does any potential update you can give us where we are with getting additional support from the state? And I have a very different perspective for us when we go and request support from the state. I've never liked the tin cup analogy, because in this specific city, the state is a huge resource and a huge friend, but also part of the problem when it comes to our tax-exempt buildings. And I always have said that it's not us going with a tin cup, it's us going with a rental invoice, because if you are on our land and you have to help pay for that land. So I think for me, as we have these conversations with our state partners, I'm hoping that it's, and I'm sure that it's a continuous support and not just a one-time support, because those buildings aren't going anywhere. Those state agencies aren't going anywhere, and we still have to maintain the roads and maintain public safety. I'm hoping that's being considered. People are giving out their ideas for revenue. I'm going to give you mine. You can take it as you wish. Commuter tax. I think we should look to limit the pain as much as possible to our residents. And I know commuter tax has a lot of different complicated entities and multiple layers that need to approve of that, and I understand that, but I think it cannot just be all the pain for our residents and on our staff. So if you could give any updates that you may be able to share about the state's conversations and potential support. Thank you.
Sure. I think the first thing to say about the state advocacy effort is that Mayor Pliers is the #1 advocate for the city of Albany. We've had all the meetings. So if you look at all the places that you need to go and cover all the ground, our state delegation, again, Senator Fahey, Assemblymember McDonald, Assemblymember Romero. The decision makers in the two houses of the legislature and the executive. A direct meeting with the executive, as well as multiple meetings with the state budget director. Communication with the Speaker of the Assembly, as well as top staff in the Assembly. Direct meeting with the leader of the New York State Senate, as well as top fiscal staff of the Senate. That yielded, at least in the 30-day amendments, additional transitional resources for the city from the executive. That yielded, in a one-house budget, a proposal for additional revenues in both houses. How it shakes out at the end is that's what we're waiting for. That's what we need. That's what we need to know. I think from an advocacy perspective, the mayor and the office, I mean, you know that there are multiple people and multiple relationships. We've gone up the hill and done that part. I think they would tell you the same. And we just need to get to the end. We need to get to the end. I think it's worth noting, again, that every single upstate city is in a hole. We are trying to do our job of advocacy with the utmost professionalism, with respect, admiration, and adoration for our colleagues that are in the capital, since we are the capital city. I would hope that we have not only represented the office of the mayor properly to not only our state delegation, but the larger body politic of the state, and that you all could feel that energy and that pride as a collective part of this government. I wrote it down.
Councilmember Brody.
I think the state aid conversation for last year, understanding that advocacy is enormously helpful to all of us. What in those conversations have been the assurances? Let me back up. I've heard a wide range of dollar values, and as most recently as yesterday, 15 million to 35 million. Can you elaborate more on what the ask has been and how that's been justified? And whether there's been any discussion of whether that is specifically for 2025 or if there's a different ask for 2026 as well.
Understood. I think you heard the 35 is because people were combining two numbers. as opposed to just one.
If you could help back the bus up then, because I think there is a lot of noise out there.
We have never used the number 35. The administration hasn't sent, in our communications with you, with the public, with the press, we've always kept the numbers separate because that's, it's to your point.
Right.
Now,
So to clarify, the 15 is to essentially retroactively close the gap for last year.
correct,
And then the delta is for 26?
correct.
Okay. Thank you for that.
Yep.
There's been no talk of that being annualized, made permanent, baked into law, anything of that nature, or has there?
We receive 20 million in cap city funding currently, correct? I think that's our number. It was budgeted for 20, it was budgeted for 20.7 in 2026. Thank you, Chairman. There's always a desire to bake in a budget number. Albany rarely does that. Rarely does it. This is the first year that we've asked for this additional money. The 15. The 15. I think the state would feel that they were not good stewards of state resources if they funded a projection versus an actuality. So the 15 was something that we had backed up information from the treasurer, that it was real, knowing that it could fluctuate, but that was the best information we had at the time, and that was the ask that we made. You saw that number directly in the Senate budget, in a variation of additional resources in the Assembly One House budget. We certainly would always take more.
Councilmember Farrell. I just wanted to offer a clarification. I think when the deputy mayor was saying Albany doesn't do that, you meant the state, not the city.
Not the city,
It gets,
correct.
when you hear in those halls people talk about Albany, they don't usually mean us, so I
Yes,
just wanted to
that is true.
clarify
That's a vestige of my old world.
Yeah, and state budget numbers, we're fortunate that capital city funding has been carried over year to year, but that's not necessarily something that is guaranteed. And it's not something that is necessarily normally done. So we talk a lot about, I think it's a normal thing in Albany for us to say, we want to get this year to year in the budget. It's just not a normal thing that is done. So I think every municipality would love it. AIM funding, the aid and incentives to municipalities, that is in the budget as a formula year to year. That's something that goes to all municipalities, so that is a guarantee, but that's not specifically earmarked to any one municipality.
No, the 20 million we're discussing is the cap city funding that hasn't been guaranteed annually. Yeah. Yes, absolutely, but it was already included in the governor's executive budget. So the proposed budget, it just has not been enacted, but yes.
Any other questions for the mayor's staff? Thank you for your time this evening. We appreciate you being willing to meet with the committee and answer our questions. I am gonna, because we're running on 7:30, I'm gonna try and get through this very quickly. It will provide you guys with a background and understanding of what's been happening financially over the last several years to get us to the place where we are right now in 2026. Can everybody hear me? Okay. In listening to both the comments from the public as well as the fact that we have new council members coming on, I thought it would be very helpful to sort of have a how the budget happens 101 and to also talk about the fiscal data that we have from last session, which does paint a pretty solid picture of why we're in the position that we're in. I do want to thank our senior legislative aide, Brian Jimenez, for fact-checking this presentation that I spent an inordinate amount of time working on. So without further ado, starting in around the beginning of June through August 1st, each city department develops a budget proposal, which is then submitted to the administration. And by administration, I mean administrative services and the budget office under administrative services. The administration then reviews those projected spending plans as well as projected revenue and works with the mayor's office and oftentimes goes back to those departments in August through September. And on September 30th, which is the final date that the budget can be proposed, the mayor submits a final budget proposal to the Common Council. In October through November, we review that proposed budget, we negotiate amendments. The budget may pass or fail. It's important for council members as well as members of the public to know and understand that if the budget were to fail, let's say the council voted the 2026 budget proposal down, the city would still be able to operate on what's known as a contingency budget, and whatever had been passed through for the previous fiscal year, the city would be authorized to continue to operate on those numbers. So even if we hadn't passed 2026, we'd still be operating under 2025 numbers, and we'd likely be in a pickle no matter what. After the budget is adopted, the administration and the Chief City Auditor's Office, along with the Treasurer's Office and the Council, are able to make adjustments to that budget through the Board of Estimate and Apportionment. That process begins in January of each budgeted fiscal year. And for those in the public who are listening in, we are still processing through estimate and apportionment budget movement for fiscal year 2025 through estimate and apportionment, as well as addressing budget transfers for 2026 as we go through this process. So our city fiscal year spans from January 1 through December 31st. That is separate and distinct from the state's fiscal year, which operates from April 1st through March 30th, and the federal fiscal year, which runs, I believe, October 1st through September 30th. We have to create a balanced budget, and if our projected revenue falls short, we have to cut expenditures, so our revenues always have to be equal to our expenditures. We can't spend more than what we actually collect. As part of our review, meaning the Common Council's review of the budget, we analyze historical revenue data and current trends. So when we were looking at the budget and evaluating the budget for fiscal year 2026, the data that we had to look at was fiscal year 2024 actuals and the Q1 and Q2, quarter 1 and Q2, quarter 2, 2025 financials. We are fairly dependent on the budget office and the treasurer for updates on our fiscal situation. And we did have very extensive conversations about that during the budget process, particularly in our first budget meeting is when we typically meet with the budget office and the treasurer to look at revenue projections, our debt outlook, so on and so forth. The Common Council is not particularly involved in the day-to-day oversight of the budget. However, under city code, when estimate and apportionment transfers exceed the aggregate 4% of the total annual city budget, those budget transfers then require Common Council review and approval. And for anyone who's interested, that can be found under Section 604D of the Charter. I believe it's also contained within a separate portion of city code.
Yeah, there's a portion in Chapter 42 under Board of Estimate and Apportionment.
We also have authority under that section of the code to address changes in salary totals, which many of you saw at the beginning of this year. That is why that legislation had to come through the council as opposed to the administration being able to just shift money around without further authorization from the council. In terms of day-to-day monitoring of city expenses, that process is typically done between the administration, the chief city auditor, and the treasurer. The administration requests payments and budget transfers. They make day-to-day decisions on staffing, overtime, those types of things. The chief city auditor approves payments and reviews every payment before it is paid. They also are responsible for running the Board of Estimate and Apportionment and approving all budget transfers. And the treasurer is the entity that makes payments and investments and issues our bonds. Our current fiscal situation in December of 2025, the Board of Estimate and Apportionment authorized a transfer of $6.4 million from the debt reserve funds. That was specifically moved to pay for police overtime, health insurance, and contingency funds. We learned in March of 2026 that expenditures for 2025 would exceed revenue by roughly $15 million, and that they estimated that we would be short by roughly $19 million for fiscal year 2026. And currently, and again, we are not pointing fingers at the treasurer's office. I think that there has been some significant issues in untangling what exactly happened in 2025. But we do not have up-to-date information on fiscal year 2025 because we've seen delays in reports for our fourth quarter financial report. At this point in time, is the Board of Estimate and Apportionment is anticipating a request to transfer $12 million for fiscal year 2025, rolling over $3 million in remaining debt into fiscal year 2026. And that $12 million is supposed to be coming out of our general fund, and that would zero out all savings for the city in order to close the books on 2025.
Are you taking questions?
I can take questions at this point in time.
I don't know if you want me to wait to the end.
No, that's okay.
Back up a bit. Leave the city with no savings. Can you elaborate on that?
So, again, if this does come to pass, that would exceed the 4% budgeted transfer. So, you know, if anybody was paying attention to our last ENA meeting, I indicated that from our perspective, the city exceeded its 4% in 2025 when they made the $6.4 million transfer, that should have come through the Common Council. There is a differing of legal opinion on that, and at this point, it happened, it was done, but we have asked to have those come through the council going forward. That $12 million request would have to come through council authorization. My concern is that it would have a significant impact on the city's bond rating. And so it would make any borrowing going forward much more expensive than it currently is. It also leaves us with absolutely no cash reserves. That $6.4 million was all of our cash reserves in our debt reserve fund. So any overages in spending would become deficit spending, and that would put us in a position to be under a financial control board. Did I satisfy your questions?
I want to make clear for anybody who's here or listening that I think the point you are getting to is the point that I think is the most critical here, that this is not a question of plugging last year's hole. We're potentially in a hole all over again and have been for the last 3.5 months. And the administration doesn't seem to be doing anything about it.
I can't speak to the administration's day-to-day.
Right, and I'm sorry, I don't mean to
And
put you in
that
that
is not my purpose and my role right now. I am trying to provide some context to how we got to the place that we're in. So one of the things that I sat down and did was analyze a slew of fiscal data over the last several years, and thankfully, because we now have access to ERP, or at least
limited access.
Some limited access, Brian was able to actually go in and update some of these numbers so that they're much more accurate. However, I will note here for anyone who's listening that these numbers are somewhat subject to change, particularly as we're looking at 2025, because we haven't fully closed the books. So you may see some shifts to the actual data that we're presenting today, but it is up to date as of this week. So since 2022, our property tax levy has actually only increased by about 5.23%. We made decisions. We can't kind of go back and change those decisions, but there were specific decisions that were made around affordability concerns that informed our decision to not increase property taxes to the tax cap threshold during that time. However, in looking at the data today, that leaves us in a pretty negative position fiscally in terms of revenue. For all other sort of tax revenue, including pilots, which are payments in lieu of taxes that we receive from various entities that are tax exempt, we projected a roughly 3% increase for fiscal year 2025 from the fiscal year 2024 budget. And then the tax revenue, excluding our property tax, is in total about 7.23% short to date, or roughly $5.3 million. And those revenue categories include cannabis sales tax. It includes projections for other forms of sales tax that we take in, as well as the shortage that we saw on those pilots. And if you're interested in seeing what this actually looks like, if you look at the second to last column, that shows what we projected we were going to receive in terms of local tax revenue in 2025. But what we actually to date have taken in is closer to our 2024 actuals, slightly higher than 2024, but not by much. We also have a wide range of revenue from departmental income to intergovernmental payments. For 2025, we projected roughly $37.5 million. To date, we've only received about $31.7 million of those funds, so we were short about $5.7 million. The majority of that shortage was the school speed zone camera shortfall. Again, we enacted that program to improve driver behavior, and that program seems to be successful, but that also meant that we took in significantly less money than was projected. We also had a pretty significant shortfall on a number of miscellaneous revenue lines that totaled about $2.5 million.
And just to note, I think the revenue anticipated for 2026 is actually the same as
Correct.
25.
There are a number of items, as I said earlier in the meeting, that we have asked questions about because they are revenue items that were booked for 2026, that in looking at data in March, around the time that we were notified, some of those had some funds that came in, but not the total revenue, and there were other line items that had absolutely no revenue whatsoever. And so, again, it becomes a question of, did it exist? Did we not bill for this yet? Are we still waiting on funds to come from federal and state government, which sometimes can be significantly behind in payments? And we are still awaiting answers to those questions. And so, again, you can see here in the various different mechanisms under which we categorize that sort of non-tax revenue, where we were short versus where we met or exceeded projected revenue. And across most of those categories, to date, that revenue has fallen short. I want to move on to the impact of federal, state, and county aid. So we actually saw an 82% decrease from fiscal year 2024 in federal aid. Much of that was ARPA related. However, there is a significant shortfall of about $3.8 million in federal funds not received. Those mostly involve the SAFER grant, which is a grant fund that traditionally had been allocated to the fire department, and funding that we receive from HUD. Our HUD funds are predominantly just a pass through the city to the Albany Community Development Agency, which is a public benefit corp that is operated by the city but somewhat separate. But it does appear, and we had discussions about this at budget, we did not anticipate that there would be federal cuts to public safety money. We anticipated that those grant funds would come back up for renewal, and they did not. So that totaled another roughly 3.8 million total. We projected a 20% increase in state aid for fiscal year 2024. There was a shortfall of a little over $500,000 in various grant funds that were not received. I know when I looked back in March, one of the biggest components of those grant funds was the New York State Give grant. It looks like some of that revenue may have now come in, Brian.
I'm sorry, I was uploading the presentation.
Yeah.
What was that?
New York State Give was one of the big funds that did not come in, but it looks like that some of those funds have now come in.
Yeah, it didn't seem like those funds were received just yet.
Okay. Give Operations is a grant through DCJS that is awarded to a range of different law enforcement entities who work in coordinated effort to remove guns and other things from our streets, and those funds are specifically to cover police overtime associated with those activities. And that is one of the big lines that we saw $0 coming in. One of the other sort of issues in funding projections was county aid. For the last several years, we have had opiate settlement funds that have come through the city from the county, and we projected no change to those settlement funds, and ultimately saw a shortfall of roughly $300,000. And again, those are one of the things that we're asking questions about as to why that revenue was booked as it was. And so here you can see how those aid streams changed. And while we did see a slight uptick in our state aid, it was still short of what we projected our state aid was going to be. So when you look at the trend from fiscal year 2022 to fiscal year 2026, our spending has increased by about 19.28%, while property tax revenue has only increased by about 5.6%. Our debt service costs have increased by roughly $2.5 million, which impacts our cash flow for operational expenses. So the more that we have to pay down debt, the less money we have to actually operate city services within any given fiscal year. And our salary costs have increased by about 17.48%, or $14.8 million, while staffing has largely remained flat across departments. And it's important to note here that wages, benefit, and retirement makes up about 73% of all city spending.
I'm curious on that with the amount of inflation, because we know we had hyperinflation there for a bit. Can that be tied into these numbers, do you think?
No, so most of our staffing costs have increased as a result of our union contracts. So we have 13 different bargaining units, you know, and those negotiated salary increases have a compounding effect. So, you know, the number that you have for year one is automatically added to year two and year three, in addition to whatever those new salary increases. And then whatever you're spending in year two gets added to year three, in addition to that salary rate increase. So your costs grow exponentially over time with those contracted salary expenditures. And I have a slide coming up that kind of shows you in the sort of big buckets of staffing, like where we spend the most money is the police department, the fire department, and general services. And it shows you the trend of how those actual salary costs have gone up, while we know that we have not actually added positions.
Correct.
So that is
But what I'm trying
largely,
to say is, we got to give increases because of inflation. If inflation's running at 4 and 5% a year, when we had the Governor Cuomo years where it was 2% cap, you couldn't go above that, you couldn't get more than a 2% raise. I mean, those days are kind of, you know.
but we also need to be able to make payroll within the revenue that we have coming in. So that is going to be an incredibly tricky process for us going forward. I just thought it was important to contextualize for everybody sort of where we're seeing increased expenditures versus what's happening with the revenue, because I think it does paint a very clear picture of how we got to this point. And here again, you can just see the sort of year to year over total planned expenditure increases, as well as the year to year increase in personnel costs and debt service. And as I said before, in answer to your question, Tom, we have 13 bargaining units with contractual wages and wage increases that compound over time. We currently have, from my knowledge in our budget discussions, one contract outstanding. That is the primary contract for Albany Water, Department of General Services, and certain units within the Department of Recreation. That's our AFSCME contract, and as far as I know, they have gone to PERB for mediation, which will ultimately slow down that process because the city literally can't offer negotiating dates. But that will also draw out the potential for us to have significant back salary costs whenever that is finalized. We also, one of the other factors is that we did the pay equity study. We right-sized wages for all non-union staff, which, Ginny, I don't know if you remember, it was at like 25% roughly of our workforce is not unionized. So while I know members of the public may often say that this was a raise for people at the very top, that was not the case. But that did impact our
Under, it's around, I mean, around 20, like, I thought it was right around 20%, which is not that different, but different enough.
Yeah,
And it is a wide range of people.
I couldn't find my notes on that because we're going back to, I think, 2022 budget discussions. But that did sort of also grow our total salary costs citywide. And I just wanted to note in here, in case anybody is interested in understanding, we did a salary increase for elected officials. It was the first salary increase that we did in 8 years. We can only do salary increases for elected officials at the end of a term, because you cannot vote on your own salary within the term. So if we did not do those in 2025, we would not have had an opportunity to do salary increases until 2029. The combined salary increases can't come to an impact for the next 4 years to the budget of $108,000, or 2.96% of total personnel increases. Yes.
I think it's, I just want to give a historical reasoning because it may sound like, wow, you guys just increase people's salaries. But I think it's important to remember that in 2022, 2023, we were bleeding people, and we were having a significant issue with trying to maintain and retain staff, and we were underpaying people that were working and providing services to our city residents. So I just think it's important to put that out there, because I think if you see this in the context, without the full context of why were we doing a study or why were we negotiating with our unions, it had to do with retention, and it had to do with paying people a more fair salary for their services, which is already, to be quite honest, for many of the people that we have, especially our union workers, especially in some of our unions, is below our median city income. So I think it's important that we have these conversations. As we have these conversations, I think it's important that we give a good historical understanding of why we had these studies and why we had these negotiations with our union, and the moment that we were in while we were having those discussions. Because you know, I don't want people to, oh, well, no wonder you guys gave everybody raises. No, we had to keep our staff, we had to keep our officers, we had to keep our public safety, we had to keep people. And if everyone else is, if you can make 50,000 here or make 70,000 elsewhere, where are you going to go? And we compete with the state, and we can compete with other entities. So I think I'll be the one that says that. I'm also going to say I am not someone that you know, has worked to try to keep the taxes low. You know, again, we had ARPA funding at the time. The word has always said 2026 was supposed to be the tough budget. It just hit us 2 years early.
I 100% agree with you. I am not making an argument that those are bad decisions, or that it is inappropriate or bad for us to negotiate fair contracts with our union staff in any way, shape, or form. I just think it's really important for us to understand that we have not really kept revenue at pace with those obligated expenditures. And that's really sort of the carry-through that I'm hoping that people pick up on as we move forward, because that seems to be one of sort of the big holes that we have from the data that I looked at. And again, this sort of just shows you, you'll see a dip in the Albany Police Department in 2022, I believe staffing year for the department, but as staff has come back online, you'll see their total salary expenditures increase over time. Same with the fire department and general services. Both of those entities have been relatively stable. I think AFD is probably the best in terms of being able to see how those contractual wage increases actually impacts, because their staffing has been so stable, and their sort of overtime expenditures have been relatively stable, that uptake in cost from roughly 20 million to roughly 25 million really shows you the actual total cost of those union contracts coming onto the books and how that impacts our total planned salary expenditures. One of the other things that I personally started to think about in terms of what happened in 2025 is our capital improvement plan. When we do big projects like the Lincoln Park Pool, the City Hall roof, Albany West, Albany South, We bond in such a way that we only allow the city to borrow cash up to the amount that we're receiving in various other forms of income for that project, which means that in 2025, just on these 4 projects alone, which is certainly not the only capital improvement project that we undertook that had grant funding, at any point in the given fiscal year, we were floating about $17.4 million in cash. Those projects have to be completed before the grant funds that are attached to them can be actualized. So for example, 10 of the 11 million, I believe, has come in for the Lincoln Park pool at this point, but those funds, that 10 million of grant funds did not come in until that project was complete. City Hall roof is not complete, so the roughly 2 million that we did not borrow for that project is still outstanding until that project is completed. And I believe if you look at the ARPA funding that did not come in, that was booked in for 2025, I believe those are attached to projects at Albany West and Albany South, which are not complete. And so we won't be able to actualize those funds until those capital projects are fully executed. And I sort of bring this to everyone's attention because, you know, for a very long time, it made the most sense for us to bond in the way that we bonded for these projects, because that means that we're not bringing debt onto the books that we pay interest on. However, we sort of reached a critical mass in capital projects, and that may not have been the best decision. It certainly made it very difficult for us to pay bills, in some cases pay contractor bills, which delayed completion of projects. And so we may need to have a deeper conversation with Treasurer Sean Farr about the process for borrowing. You know, can the city actually tackle this many projects in any given fiscal year? And what would the consequences be for us if we were to borrow for the full cash amount and then use those funds to pay down debt at a later time? How much would it increase expense for a particular project? And then sort of my recommendations for you all as the finance chair in terms of our next step as a committee as we go through this process. First and foremost, we need a full accounting of fiscal year 2025 revenue shortfalls and the implications that those shortfalls have for fiscal year 2026. We need to continue to work with the administration to bring spending in line with the anticipated revenue, and we certainly need to go back to our budget process and identify key information needed to analyze proposed budgets moving forward. I think that the learning process, at least for myself, of having sat through 4 years of budgets and then finding out information, particularly with regards to grants and reimbursements, is that we really should have that information in hand rather than trusting that because that revenue is booked that it's going to materialize. I think we need to have a much deeper understanding of that cash flow during budget session. I also spoke with our senior legislative aide, Brian Jimenez, about the process that brought about this presentation, and I think that we will likely do something similar in September in anticipating what we're seeing in our systems, so that we sort of have a level playing field before the budget is proposed and what we anticipate for revenue for fiscal year 2027, now that we actually have that data, to be able to sort of make our own projections for what we may be looking at. And that will hopefully help you all ask questions and be able to review the budget from a much more critical lens than we have previously been able to do before. And so just to kind of wrap things up, up until this year, we have had very limited access to ERP, which is our Enterprise Resource Planning System. And it is what the city uses for managing the budget overall. So a lot of our analysis was based on figures collected from our previous system on April 13th, as well as previous budget books. As fiscal year 2025 were not yet finalized, the analysis is based on inherently incomplete data. So this is really the best real-time information we could provide to you all. And there are several departments, including the police department, that have different accounts for accounting purposes that were consolidated for our presentation in the budget. As access was only recently received, these figures have not been collected for review, and budgeted figures are substituted for actual expenditures in the analysis, as the figures titled total wage and debt expenditures and total personal services expenditures. So we just wanted to kind of note those two issues, as I said, and before I really got into this, that some of this data may be subject to change as we finalize the books for 2025. So, questions? Go ahead.
And I didn't ask the city because I don't know, and maybe I shouldn't ask you, but I am concerned about the budget director leaving and hearing from the administration they don't know numbers, and I get worried when I hear all the information's in one person's head because anything can happen to that thing. Is there anything in the future we can do to have a better grasp?
That is why we demanded access. So the actual sort of what I would say meta access, initially they granted us kind of a meso access or middle access where we can kind of track like the total expenditures department by department, which is more than we had before. But what we're really asking for is the transaction by transaction detail to actually know what we're spending money on and where money is coming in from department by department. So I am hoping to, as we move along in the process under my leadership and in coordination with our staff, to have a better handle on those things from the council's perspective. I can't speak to the administration. We don't direct those personnel. That is a question really for Commissioner Dixon and the mayor, in my opinion.
And I would have liked to seen you or somebody from the finance committee on that committee going out to department heads just to listen in, and I didn't get a chance to say that, but moving forward, we need to.
If I can just kind of piggyback on what our finance chair has said, one of the things that I'm very interested in is, obviously the immediate is budget shortfalls, what we're going to do for 2025 and 2026. But then the broader perspective of what alarm bells should have gone off that didn't, because we do have some protocols in place that one would have hoped would have kind of sounded. And that could be on, I'm always willing to accept fault, like that could be on me, I could be part of the problem with that, or that could be something that was two different opinions of something clarifying that, I think, is important, but also looking at the next steps of what alarm bells should be in place in the future to make sure that this does not happen again. And I think that that's a big part of us working through it, but it is, the immediate is obviously figuring out exactly what to do with the budget shortfalls for last year and this year.
And I will say, you know, we all receive the notifications for the Board of Estimate and Apportionment. So back on December 2nd, we all got emails that showed that they were moving $6.4 million from the debt reserve to cover salary expenses. In the previous years that I had served on the council, I have never seen a maneuver like that. You know, I didn't bother to read the day-to-day. I would read the quarterly reports, and you wouldn't see that level of movement. But there is a responsibility that we own collectively as a body for not reading those meeting minutes. That was a lesson to be learned, that we have a certain level of responsibility to track those transactions. Now, I can't speak to our previous finance chair and our previous council president. Those E&A meetings happen in the middle of a workday. It's at 1:30 in the afternoon. I have done my best to make the time to attend, and I can say that Council President Kimbrough has also been doing his best to be physically present at those meetings. It has been a juggle. We requested to see if we could move the timing of those meetings to better accommodate those of us who have to work full-time, but thus far they have not been moved. Any other questions? Councilmember Ballerin.
I'm also going to just give another piece of information for where we were in December and November. We had a grenade thrown on us with the inclusionary housing conflict that really divided this body and had this body addressing other issues and maybe not looking at reports as much. That's not an excuse. I take accountability for from what I voted for. I take accountability for being one of the members that was looking to get taxes lowered last year. I take accountability for that. You know, but I think it's also important to give historical perspective of where we were when these situations happened, so we can understand how these decisions may have occurred.
And in context, it was just after the budget had passed. We had been told things were fine during that process. The two individuals that represented the council at the time that sat on that board were at the end of their terms. Their terms were ending in just a few weeks. I think part of what happened between 2025 and 2026 is that we had a perfect storm. You had the end of an administration, a new administration coming on, a number of people coming off the council, and individuals leaving key critical positions in the city because for whatever reason, transitioning off because of a change in administration or because they had another opportunity. But all of those things did not work in our favor to have a handle on what was happening financially towards the end of last year. We also didn't get the third quarter report from the treasurer's office till after the budget passed. Typically we have that in hand before the budget passed, and that was sort of the first document that indicated there were concerns, but those concerns were projections and not actual. So they anticipated, I think, 7 to 8 million in revenue shortfalls towards the end of the fiscal year. That came out 5 weeks before the end of the fiscal year. You really can't off-ramp a budget at that point in time. You're not going to actualize 8 million in savings in 5 weeks. And so, you know, yes.
And I did want to note that we did ask for the Q3 reports. It was stuff that we did ask for. We did ask we go line by line through the budget every year. We did ask a lot of questions about revenue and revenue discrepancies. I will say we didn't always ask if it was a consistent number. It's usually if it was different, we would ask.
Correct. So if,
But sometimes we would, I mean, there was a lot of questions that were asked by the council in the budget process about revenue. And I also would just note that, I know from my perspective with that ENA, I had thought there was process and protocols in place that was beyond just us looking at that email that comes out every 2 weeks, which something I regularly do. And at that, I honestly don't remember. I'm assuming I didn't, because I think I would have flagged that. But it was, in my mind, there was protections in place that I think that's just one of the things that we need to look at, because maybe they're not what I thought they were and they should be. Or maybe it's something where it was two different understandings of something.
and I will say that I am working with council staff on potential legislative updates with regards to how money gets moved around and at what point the council has to be notified and has to authorize those budgeted transfers, particularly given the lack of agreement, if you will, between how that language is currently interpreted as to what counts as a budgeted transfer versus an appropriation.
I will note that the charter does specify what budgeted funds is, and that is all funds included in the adopted budget, additional fund transfers to the general fund under the subsection, or any transfer funds from an unappropriated fund balance.
So just to note, once we get over that 4%, all ENA transfers are supposed to come through the council.
I mean, we as a body can then kick things back to ENA. So for example, let's say they hit the 4% threshold. We could say, you can still move money that's under $25,000. We don't need to have that come through the finance committee and wait for a vote in order for that bill to be paid, so that you don't completely gunk up the wheels, so to speak, in terms of the city being able to pay its bills, because we certainly don't want to be in a position by which we're incurring substantial late fees because everything has to come through council authorization. That would mean that, you know, you're a whole month behind now in being able to even submit those purchase orders, because to the auditor's office for review. So, but again, that is specifically there so that the council becomes alerted when there's a financial issue with the city being able to pay its bills. Yes.
So I guess, Mike, it's more of a statement, less of a question. We currently don't have anything on the books that says when someone is moving funds from debt reserves or from our fund balance, which is our rainy day funds, that it has to come to the council.
It would come to the council if those expenditures were more than 4% of the total budget, which for fiscal year 2025 was roughly around 8 million.
Okay. I mean, I thought we had, I can slightly remember, and maybe my memory is getting old, in 2021, when we had just gotten the ARPA funds, us having a conversation about putting something on the books to make sure that we had we had a vote when we moved money from the fund balance or from debt reserves. I think actually it was the fund balance that we were really talking about. But I think we should also include debt reserves, and I'm not sure if that's something that we can legally do, but I think we should consider it, because I was shocked when at the first finance meeting that we had, we were informed that they had used our total debt reserves. As someone who sat in this seat in 2020 and 2021 and clearly remember how we used our debt reserves and part of our fund balance to get through 2020. Having that wiped out without council, more than just an email notification, was upsetting. So I'm not sure if there's something we can do, and I'm looking at legal counsel. But I think if there's something we can do to make sure that when funds are being transferred from specifically fund balance and debt reserves, that council either have a vote or a minimum get a more critical notice than just a biweekly annual E&A report, because that's a signal. That is a signal that we're going through some tough times, or we're in a different period than just tough times when you have to start using your debt reserves and your fund balance. That's a signal that we are in a critical time, and all hands should be on deck. So again, I'm not sure if that's a question for you or legal counsel or the body as a whole for something for us to consider.
I mean, I think I can take that back, and staff and I can kind of parse through those concerns to determine if there is additional legislation that we can move through the chamber. The question becomes how much that impacts the charter and whether we're talking about having to do referendum on that issue. Because there's parts of the city charter that deal with this issue, and then parts of city code. So I will certainly take that suggestion back and begin to work with staff through that process. I think there probably are some other tweaks that we are going to be looking to make things crystal clear as to how that process should look and work, so that there's no question about what should and should not be done, and how the board should operate when moving budgeted funds. Do we have any other questions, Councilmember Farrell?
I just wanted to note, I think as we go through this process, we're going to have a lot of different ideas and concepts of legislation that we should move, and I think they're all important things that we should keep on the table as we're moving through. But I also think we have to, there'll be some things that I think will be more immediate than others, but on a whole, I personally want to see, I love that idea, Alfredo, but I also want to see exactly, as we look back in the different pieces, what would have been most helpful, and kind of get a broader perspective. So I don't necessarily want us to, the immediate thing is the budget holes, but I want to make sure that we're doing this the right way so that we really get things in place that are going to make a difference. And I think it's going to take, I think we're going to have a lot of different ideas as we go through, and I just want to make sure that maybe we can keep track of all of them as we kind of move along and consider the different possibilities as we're going through, and not necessarily do piecemeal one after another. I also just wanted to note that, and Councilmember Keegan can speak to the additional Finance Committee meetings, but I will say we did reach out to the treasurer, who has conflicts for those nights. We would like to have the treasurer, like, speak in depth to the treasurer at some point.
Yeah, we may be looking to reschedule those to a date where he can actually make it to talk about debt and bonding and all of those other sort of pieces. And hopefully by then we have the Q4 report, so he would be able to come speak on that as well. Councilmember Brody. Can you put your mic on?
Thank you. Sorry. We're rescheduling the 22nd and 29th.
We are considering at least the 22nd. If we have additional updates from the administration, we probably will keep that 29th date, but our intention was to have the treasurer in, and he's not available in either of those dates.
Is he, I mean, is it just those dates, or is it like not for the next month? Because I don't think we could wait 3 weeks for some of this information.
He said that he's very willing to come in. It's,
Did he offer dates that did work for him?
not yet, but we are working
We
on
did
it.
ask for those.
We should, yeah, maybe, rather than waiting till May.
I mean, again, we announced those meetings because we have to provide notice, and we preferred to have them noticed. If we had to cancel, we have to cancel. We also, in our planning for those, had thought that the state budget was going to pass around April 7th at that time, and that did not happen. So,
You know where I stand on waiting for the state budget to write us a check. It's irrelevant to what the problems are that we still need to understand the basis of. Knowing that, and that's actually a great segue to my actual question, there are elements of the treasurer's reports that we do not have to wait for. And I'd like to propose, either now or whatever the formal process is, that for those things that we are given a more regular update, or for this, in this case, I'm sort of on demand. I think one of them, we can understand payroll year to date, and we can also understand cash on hand. And I think neither are elements that we should be waiting multiple quarters to get after the fact. And in a turnaround situation, which I think we're in at this point, understanding how precarious our rainy day fund, our debt service reserve is, understanding our cash on hand, and as I've understood it in looking back into the interim reports throughout most of obviously 25 and 24, that number has been dwindling steadily. And I think that's something this body has not yet fully asked about, and that the treasurer would be, I think, uniquely positioned to answer a question about.
I mean, we can certainly ask for that information from him, and if those entities are unwilling to grant us that information, then we can do it by legislation. It would be my preference that they would provide it to us. We are entitled to pretty much every document generated in the city, with the exception of the mayor's office. So.
Okay.
Do we have any further questions? Do you guys hopefully find this helpful?
I just want to say thank you so much for spending the time to put that together, because I think it's incredibly helpful for us to have that as a kind of a framework to move forward. So thank you.
So do I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Motion by Councilmember Farrell, second. Second by Councilmember Lumpkin. All in favor?